These 2025 NFL draft prospects are being way overhyped. Stay tuned to find out which guys we think we need to cool down on. We're at the end of the draft process, meaning that there's been plenty of guys that have been super overblown. Let's cut through the noise, Ryan. Who is your most overrated draft prospect in this class?
This is going to be a divisive one. There's going to be a lot of pushback on this one, but it's Jackson Dart, quarterback for Ole Miss, is where I want to start with, Joe. Look, man, we went, the full circle conversation here is I remember talking about him in the preseason. I'm like, hey, man, this is a pretty cool mid-round quarterback that could be a potential day 2 kid that get excited about, right? He's really good inside the pocket. He's a good athlete. Yes, his arm strength is just middling and probably slightly below average for NFL standards, but there's a little bit of a gamer feel to a Jackson Dart. And flashing forward now several months, people are now boasting about him to be a potential maybe quarterback 2 in this class and a top 10 NFL draft pick. He's just not that player, ultimately. I'd be okay with investing a top 100 pick on him, maybe even a top 75 pick. Top 50's pushing it a little bit for me. I understand the appeal, but in a bad quarterback class, I think we've just propping up a guy with pretty average tools overall for the NFL level.
You need to have compensating traits when you are below average in certain categories. And Jackson Dart is below average in arm strength. And his accuracy and his decision-making was boosted by the offense that he was playing in. When we dive deeper, we see a guy that really struggles to move on to that second read. And his accuracy, it doesn't look as smooth as people realize it was. There's a lot of recontorting for the football from a lot of the receivers in that Ole Miss receiving corps. So I agree with you on this. I think Jackson Dart, if this was a normal draft class, if he declared last year with the same tape, he's a second, third round pick, a guy that is viewed as a future backup. But because of the desperation, we're pulling a Kenny Pickett, we're pulling a Matt Corral, we're doing the same stuff that we do when there's not enough options, and we're propping up a prospect that was a nice name, and we don't want to be negative about him, but we have to start to level set here of the actual expectations. Speaking of a guy who needs expectations and a level set, we're pissing off Ole Miss fans with this video. Trey Amos. I watched Trey Amos and I thought, man, this is a good football player who's going to be a really good zone corner. Flies upfield. He's a pretty good tackler. He's pretty physical. He's got good length. Checks all those boxes. But he doesn't have the hips to play man coverage. He just doesn't. He's very clunky. He doesn't transition very well. And that's fine. Not every corner needs to be a first-round prospect that goes on to be an all-pro that can play multiple schemes. But right now, this is a guy who's been billed by a lot of folks in the media as a late first rounder, and the NFL might even be willing to take him in the end of the first round. I'm not saying that Trey Amos will be a bust, but I just worry that if he doesn't go to the right system and he's not granted the right opportunities to succeed, we could be sorely disappointed with the results.
Yeah, I mean, scheme-specific corners is a little bit of a scary thing just in general because there's only so many of those X amount of schemes that will be able to fit into. I'm right there with you. I've been on the Amos thing. It's not that you dislike him. It's just at some point, the hype gets a little bit too much, man. Where you're just like, guys, this is probably a second or third round corner that we're now talking about being a top 25 selection potentially in this draft. Just a little bit too much. The next one I have is going to hurt you a little bit, Joe, because I know you're a big FCS homer, obviously, with your background. Gray Zabel, offensive lineman from North Dakota State, has played tackle and guard in his career at North Dakota State. Some people project him as a center long-term in the NFL as well. Look, I like Gray Zabel. I remember talking to an agent about him last year before the 2024 NFL draft because there was at least a thought of contemplating declaring for that draft. And I liked him. I think he's a smooth mover on the interior. I think he's got a good frame, and I think he's got developing power that continues to get better and better and better. I like a lot of what I see from Gray Zabel, but I do not like first-round pick Gray Zabel. I do not like guy that might go before Tyler Booker Gray Zabel. I do not like that Gray Zabel ultimately. So I think you're potentially getting a solid starter on the NFL level if everything hits, but I do not see Pro Bowler. I do not see just plus starter without a doubt. I think that we need to temper our expectations a little bit with what Zabel can do on the NFL level.
Right. I really like Gray Zabel, and I was willing to take him middle to the end of the second round, and I thought I was high on him, but then you start to see his name prop up in the end of the first round mock drafts for some folks. Doesn't have the requisite like athleticism that we look for in an interior offensive lineman. He's not super flexible. He's downhill. I think he could be a average starting guard in the NFL, and he's going to work out like we saw him perform well at the Senior Bowl. And that tends to happen a lot with these North Dakota State guys. They're very technically refined. They're very steady, reliable players that can step right in. but the upside just isn't there beyond that. Him becoming a Pro Bowler, I just don't know if that's on the radar and worth him being a first rounder. My last guy that I think is getting really overhyped, player who I liked this film, as a designated pass rusher, Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. I think that he can be and should be a third round selection that you're drafting with an already established pass rush an already established pass rush unit that he just plugs in very specific situations, and you just let him loose. But as this first round prospect, I'm not there for it because he just doesn't have the ability to impact against the run because he doesn't have the physicality to be strong in that area. Situational pass rusher in the third round, sign me up. Every single down defensive end, I can't get behind that.
Yeah, Ezaraku is a guy that I think is really profiting off of the fact that there are a couple edges in this class that are falling down boards a little bit due to some off the field concerns, some character concerns. I think that's kind of helping him prop him up a little bit. I will say this though, Joe. I think some people in the NFL also agree with you. I've talked to a couple that are a little bit lower on Donovan Ezaraku comparatively to where maybe some other parts of the NFL are. I think he still goes in the first round, but I don't think that this is a consensusly loved prospect on the NFL level. I do think there's a little bit of volatility to that projection.
Folks, let us know in the comments, who's a guy that you just don't get that is getting way too much love right now that you're confused by? Let us know in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe. We'll talk to you later.